What the Pentagon has been looking at, what the intelligence agencies have been looking at, are the use of small tactical weapons, which could still do a huge amount of damage. Tactical weapons range from sub-kiloton to much larger than what the U.S. used at Hiroshima. Just to scale this conversation, the Hiroshima bomb was a 15-kiloton bomb. If the Russians went to use one, would they use it first in sort of a demonstration over the Black Sea? If they did that, Ian, it's hard for me to understand exactly how NATO or the United States or the Ukrainians would respond, because there are nuclear tests that the North Koreans do. We don't respond to those in a similar way. They could hit a Ukrainian base, a military target. They could hit a civilian location. They could use a small weapon. They could use a larger one. The larger they use, the bigger the chance that the radiation cloud flows back, given the prevailing winds, on Russia itself. So there are a lot of considerations, and I think the big debate inside the administration right now is, do you respond militarily? Do you respond just with economic sanctions? Do you try to use this to separate Russia from China and India, everyone else who's buying their oil right now?
So what I am hearing, both from you as well as from the policy leaders, is that nuclear war, which has been for most of my life unthinkable, is now something that policy leaders are actively thinking about.
That's right. We're suddenly thinking the unthinkable again. And part of the risk here is, and this has always been the risk about tactical nuclear weapons, unlike the big strategic weapons that could fly intercontinentally and which are under control of treaties, in this case, the New START treaty between the U.S. and Russia. The tactical weapons, of which the Russians have about 2,000, have no restrictions. We don't know very much about them. We don't inspect them. We don't know whether they are small, medium, or large. We don't really know their effects. And the chances that we would see them being prepared are only sort of 50-50. We might hear the chatter of military operations getting ready to move them, but it's not clear at all that we would actually see them being moved. So the warning would be pretty low.
The difference, as I see it, the principal difference between what we seem to be moving towards today and the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 is that after the Cuban Missile Crisis, when both sides recognized the level of danger and decided to step away from the precipice, is that you were able to achieve the status quo ante relatively quickly. In other words, the impact on the Americans and the Soviets going forward was kind of very similar to what they had before. Where this time around, it's almost inconceivable to imagine that you could create something stable given the realities of the war that the West and Russia are presently in, given the corner that President Putin has managed to dig himself into, facilitated very much, of course, by NATO.
I think that's right, Ian. First of all, it is worth thinking about the Cuban Missile Crisis because it was the closest that the world came during the Cold War to a massive calamity that would have killed millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. But the dynamics of it, as you rightly point out, were completely different. In the Cuban Missile Crisis, mutually assured destruction, MAD, did apply, right? If we went up the escalation ladder, we knew that if New York was struck, they'd lose Moscow. They knew it too, and that was a constraining factor. Here, we don't quite have that. Ukraine is not a NATO member. An attack on Ukraine would not necessarily result in a response, and probably not a nuclear response. In fact, the debate I'm hearing in the administration is, do you do a conventional military response or not? The argument against it is that it would quickly escalate, or could quickly escalate, into a nuclear confrontation. And of course, one of the things you've heard from President Biden is that among his strategic objectives here are a strong, independent, democratic Ukraine and no confrontation directly between the United States and Russia. and certainly no World War III. And I think the instability that you refer to comes from the fear that if the Russians use a tactical nuclear weapon in a conventional war and essentially get away with it, in other words, that they pay a price, but not too big a price, then all of a sudden the taboo about using nuclear weapons in a conventional conflict is gone. We have not seen nuclear weapons used in anger since the United States dropped weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. And if that goes away and suddenly smaller nuclear weapons become a weapon of choice in a conventional conflict, we're in a whole different world.